Hello. Okay, we are going to delve into the psychosocial development of our early childhood children. This is again ages 2 to 6. Just remind yourself of what 2 to 6ers are doing. They're going out into the world more, they're having play dates, they're able to talk more, they have more language to communicate. Their brain is growing in terms of myelination, they're getting faster at things. Their response times are faster. They're doing little sports. They're going to preschool. So all of this kind of works together. The more they do things, the more experiences they have. Of course, the more their brain is firing and wiring, and the more myelination is being made, and the more sort of hardwired habits they're creating around a lot of this implicit procedural learning, such as walking and playing and so forth. But then they're also out being very much more social. And they're having to sort of test what that's like. And they're taking some of those working memories and those attachment relationships, and playing them out in the world with other people, some too. And so all of this is going into their learning and into their personality and into their sense of self as they're out in the world. So I'll put myself down here as we start to talk about this a little bit more. There's a little inside out people. All right, so let's get going. Emotional development, initiative versus guilt. So this is Erikson's third stage. Erikson had trust versus mistrust in the first year. He had autonomy versus shame and doubt. And then we have initiative versus guilt. So autonomy came about when we were first learning that we are a separate human being, and we're sort of studying and practicing that selfhood a little bit. And seeing how much we can move out into the world in our little bitty mechanisms as toddlers. And now we have initiative, which is taking that little self and initiating upon the world, trying out new things, new skills and activities. So now I go to the playground and I'm going to take the initiative to go down the slide by myself, or to go up to another child and see if they want to play, or build something by myself in the sandbox, or whatever it may be. But I'm going to take initiative in the world in these little ways. And they seem little, but this is how we, again, build that architecture of the self. And when they don't succeed at them, if those around them make them feel bad about what they do. So this is a, good example. If the child is trying to pour the orange juice or pour the milk by themselves and they spill it, and oh my God, and and that can be a sort of automatic reflex from a parent. But if it's like, oh, you just always mess up, or you can't do it, or let me do that, you're no good at that, or something like that, then the child can feel guilty about their attempts in the world. And so if we do try to take this out to life, say later, how good are we at initiating new things, new adventures, new activities? Not to blame in the past, but to look at, we have, as children, this is where we start those mechanisms. And all of this helps to build their self-concept. So we talk about children from 2 to 6 as having protective optimism. They can almost overestimate their abilities, all things being equal, all things developing well. It's not going to be true for all children who are maybe in more difficult situations, but they usually have a very positive self-concept. I'm the best drawer, I'm the fastest runner, I'm the highest jumper, I can do it all, I'm the smartest, fastest, most like, best, blah, blah, blah. And their world is very small, and they're, in kind of that ideal world, they're being encouraged, and they're being, their initiatives are being encouraged, and they're being guided. And in Vygotsky's world, it may be that they're being scaffolded into learning new things. And so they have this very small idea of the world and their place in it. So anyway, I'm sorry, I had a brief pause there. So we have this protective optimism, we have this self-concept growing as they take initiative in the world. So let's look for a second. One of the big things that children of this age do is they play, hopefully. They play. And it's natural and beneficial for young children to play. Piaget said that play is the work of the child. This is what young children are meant to do in the playground and at home and in preschool and so forth. It's a lot about play. So nearly 50 years ago, Sigmund Freud suggested that every child at play behaves like a creative writer, and that he creates a world of his own, or rather rearranges the things of his world in a new way which pleases him. The creative writer does the same as the child at play. He creates a world of fantasy, which he takes very seriously, which he invests with large amounts of emotion. So if we're looking at the emotional development of these children, and the psychological development and the personality development, all of this goes in together with what they're doing, with what their experiences are. How is that firing and wiring all together? And they invest a lot of time in this play. So play is vital to many different things. To social development, play is where the child practices and makes their own the skills needed to live in connection with others. So they practice verbal and nonverbal communication. So we just see children playing. But just kind of like in that silent talk we talk about in cognitive development, that's sort of when they're talking to themselves to work things out. Play is often where they act out their confusions and understandings and questions and interests and so forth in the world and in the things they're seeing in the larger world. They take it into their play and they practice it, all these things that they're learning. Verbal and nonverbal communication skills, negotiate different roles, as they play with dolls, and the dolls have different places, and maybe if they play house, or, I don't know what they do. But, if they play house or teacher or whatever, then they, all have different roles and they act these out, respond to their peers' feelings, sharing, waiting in line. So when they're at the playground, if they're waiting in line for the slide, they have to sort of, they get the opportunity to practice these things. And this is the microcosm for the macrocosmic world they will enter into as they get older. They'll learn the lesson of differing perspectives, take other people's feelings into consideration as they grow in age. Being in these situations allows them the opportunity to practice these things. It's vital to emotional development. They act out their emotions and learn to express, cope with, and regulate their feelings, create simplified scenarios that match their emotional state. So if they're mad, you might hear the dolls being mad at mom, they're all doing that, or they draw it out or whatever. Reenact unpleasant situations as a way to understand it. Project their own dark forces onto characters they create as a way to deal with it. Because it can be difficult as parents to see children want to be the villain or have the villain or the bad guy or whatever, and not play the good guy. But sometimes this is what play allows them to do, to take what is very human in all of us, those dark forces of anger or hate or misunderstanding or aggression or whatever, but they get to place it into something else. This is why we love superhero movies. This is why we love all of these fantasy type of movies, or even why people love horror movies. It allows them to take parts of the self and see it reflected in a way, so it's a healthier way to enact that part or to see it in action than to embody it necessarily, but get to play with that part of the self, and deal with those different emotions and drives and feel that in action. Have pretend characters act out forbidden behaviors as a way to avoid adverse consequences. Pretend characters might jump off the couch that they're not allowed to do, and then they can respond to that and how they feel and work all that out about how they feel about those things. So there's a lot of different development that can go on in this what seems like a very small world of play. Children are very busy in their learning of it. There's active play, tag and being with others, but in a very active way, expends energy. It's social play. They have to kind of deal with other people in it when they're working together. If they're playing tag or they're playing chase, or they've created Star Wars action scenes or whatever while they run around. Rough and tumble play is more the wrestling, grabbing. But what are the rules? How is it fair? What can and can't be done? All of that are the questions that they have to put into play. So drama and pretending, sociodramatic play. That's a lot of that emotional where they can act out the feelings. They can take scenarios. One thing it says is like boys, good versus evil, as they practice justice, where girls practice connection through domestic scenes. You can see, does that fit for what you see with your children or in children for yourself? Was that the case? That's kind of a norm, but it doesn't always work that way. And we think about children on the playground, the boys who don't want to do that, or the little girls who don't want to do theirs and they want to play chase. And in these young years, it's a little easier for them to all kind of do it together. So play is a very important part of their social dynamic. It's a very important part of their firing, wiring of the brain for their experience, for their social learning, their emotional learning, which is what's so huge in this time that they're doing. All right, so let's look at boys and girls and how they're different and why they're different and if they're different. I have like a video on this and some other information, but I'll go over kind of the basics of it. By age 2, children know whether they are boys or girls and apply gender labels consistently. He, she, him, her. Children are convinced that certain toys are appropriate for one gender or the other by age 4. Now, again, I think that's a norm. And so the big question becomes, how do they become convinced of that? Is it biological? Is it evolutionary in us? Is it something that's built in? Is it societal only? Is it, ask yourself, how do you think that children come to those conclusions about boys' toys and girls' toys? And I think a lot of people will say, well, it's social. We tell children this is for a boy, or we tell children this is for a girl, or society does, or other children do. And then though, I'll have students and I'll have friends and people that say, from the very beginning, my little girl just loved princesses or loved this, and I offered everything up. And then I have my brother-in-law, my husband's brother's family. They have a boy and a girl. The little boy, when he was born, from the get-go, loved to wear tiaras and boas, and he loved to be the princess, and he loved the girl things. He's outgrown a lot of that, but that was really what he loved to play with. His little sister, when she was born, hated it all from the get-go. She liked Darth Vader and hated princesses, won't walk through the section. So, and I don't think that, that was a setup from the parents that I saw. So, it's interesting. My son's favorite color was pink, and is still at 11. It's like his second or third favorite color. So it is a question, though, how does this all work? So we have to look, these days we have very distinct differences between sex and gender. Didn't used to always be like that, but sex is the biological difference between male and females. Organs, hormones, body shape, body parts, sort of that genetic, what we are wired as. Gender differences are the roles and behaviors prescribed by a culture for males and females. It's also how a person names themselves or sees themselves within that context of gender, which these days is becoming much wider, our gender roles and gender identifications, and how we understand that. That's kind of, at the moment in our society, that's one of the big social changes. Age 5, there's an increased awareness of sex and gender differences. Age 8, believe that their biological sex is a permanent trait. So all of this sort of grows. So I have this is a link, and I have it uploaded. This is an article on how Target supposedly will stop selling toys for boys or for girls, in terms of their all aisles. Because if you go to like a Target, or you go to a Walmart, or you go to a big store, which toy aisles are meant for girls or for boys. And how do we know? By the prevalence of the colors. The girls are typically pink and purple, and a lot of the textures or shapes in those aisles. And then you have in boys' aisles are a lot of black or red, maybe blue, but in harder shapes and stronger things like this. So this is one way that society has sort of set this up and followed that. It wasn't always like that, though, and it's kind of interesting if you read back into how that all came about, because pink used to be more of a male color, and blue a girl color. So this was sort of a social agreement that somehow we came to. And so there's definitely something to the fact that from early on, whether it's implicit or explicit, there seem to be signs for children about what is acceptable and okay for girl to be a girl and what is acceptable and okay to be a boy, whether that's done by parents or society or stores or advertising, teachers, grandparents. How are children getting these messages and how are they identifying themselves to them? Some of them fit right into it, and then this can be the problem when some don't, or it's not comfortable, or they don't know. And then how do parents or the surrounding society deal with them not? And so we look at brain differences, and this is a video I'm going to let you watch, and I'll just say, I want you to think about this because this will talk about, I want you to look at it through evolution's lens for a moment, though, because we like to think that it's all society. But keep in mind that early man and early woman in our hunter-gatherer societies, what was men's big job? It was to hunt. And so as hunters, and the reason that women wouldn't go out on the hunt is not because anybody was necessarily being oppressive to them, but women got pregnant and it wasn't safe for the continuation of the species for women to go out and hunt and run around, and they would probably be slower and slow things down and be dangerous. So anyway, not a good idea. So the men went out and hunted, and doing so, as you watch this video, I want you to think about this. What then would be the skills that would have to grow neurologically? Well, the ability to be aware of your surroundings and to be able to sort of read your surroundings quickly and easily. Now, I want you to think about that in terms of sports today, like football and baseball. And so our men evolutionarily have their brains wired in a way differently than women, based maybe on some of those earliest things. And then also when men went out to do that together, in their male bonding time, they were quiet for need. They were active, though, doing something or watching something, and they sat side by side they weren't face to face. They were side by side as they were reading the room, reading the space, reading the field, and participating in this activity together. And then on the other hand, we have women who are kind of back at the homestead and multitasking and having to take care of children, their children, probably everybody else's children, the village. And if we were, gathering, starting some of that early planting and so forth. And so women had many different jobs, where men's was the one. So women had many different jobs that they were doing, and they were talking, they were communicating, they were gossiping, they were practicing their language skills. And so at that same time, they were face to face, connecting, and taking care of their babies. And so their oxytocin levels and so forth were getting pumped a lot more often in doing these things. So we have to think about, some of this is biological, some of this is evolutionary potentially, and how we have grown through the ages. And so now only in the last 50, 60, 70 years, there's been more of this movement towards men finding their feminine side and women getting stronger and being, feminism and so forth. So now then we sort of asked things to shift. And so evolution in the biology and the neurology that's been there a long time doesn't shift that fast. So we're kind of on a slow evolutionary process of, yes, for our society and for the fairness of all and the things that we as humans have come to appreciate about both genders and how to be together and live together, we need some changes in that. That's not a bad thing. But we also have to remember the biological mechanisms taking place, and it's not always all that easy. Women are still going to have more estrogen, and men are still going to have more testosterone in general. Not all across the board. We have fluctuations in those things. And so when you're thinking about this, again, I just like you to widen the perspective, that there are many threads that go into this, that if we're like, oh, it's all society and it's all this and it's all that, we can see in the capsule of our small time in life right now that we can think that, but we have to have the wide view and the long view sometimes to understand the bigger picture. So, Are children socialized to gender stereotypes purely, or is there something else going on? Evolution, neurology. So watch this. Think about the things I said. Think about the things you think, of course, most naturally. Write 3 sentences about how you see and feel this info. Email it to me for 1 point of extra credit, if you want to. You have to have watched the screencast to know about that. I'm not telling it otherwise. Thanks. Okay. All right, so we're already up to 20 minutes. I haven't gotten very far. I'm going to stop this, and just in case you guys need a break, which you might, and then I'll start a new one up.